Clergy should be required to report incidents of child abuse when they become aware.
Clergy should not be required to report child abuse under certain circumstances.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here is your host and moderator.
Welcome, viewers. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Andrea Luxton. I am president of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, and I am today's moderator. We have a very important conversation today, but first of all, I'd like you to meet our panelists.
Hi, I'm Tom Plumley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, and I serve at First Christian Church in downtown Fort Worth, Texas.
Hi, I'm Dan Levin. I serve as senior rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
Hi, I'm Carl Trovall. I'm professor of ethics and history at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
And I'm Mel Robeck, a senior professor of church history and ecumenics and special assistant to the president for ecumenical relations at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. I'm also an ordained minister with the Assemblies of God.
Thank you very much. And now to today's topic. A recently introduced bill in the Utah State Legislature met with powerful disapproval from churches and was pronounced dead on arrival. The bill would have closed the so-called clergy loophole in reporting child abuse, including sexual. In 33 states, clergy are exempt from laws requiring professionals such as teachers, physicians, and psychotherapists to report information about alleged child abuse to police or child welfare officials if the church deems the information privileged. The Utah bill was opposed quite importantly by Utah's Roman Catholic diocese, and even more importantly by the Mormon Church, whose members make up the vast majority of the legislature. An Associated Press review of state legislatures found that of the more than 130 bills introduced since 1987 to amend child sex abuse reporting requirements, exactly 0 successfully closed the clergy loophole. Religious institutions, mostly churches, see that as a victory for upholding the confidentiality of conversations between clergy and their parishioners. Others see it as an untold number of child predators being allowed to continue to abuse children despite having confessed the behavior to people tasked with, among other things, caring for children. Sometimes the privilege protects non-clergy church leaders too, congregations and denominational leaders, even in religious organizations that do not have clear distinctions between clergy and lay members. Both civil and criminal issues are involved, but requirements and liabilities vary widely from state to state. So let's ask our panel about child abuse and the duty to report. First of all, do you know what your state requires you or your colleagues to report? Secondly, what is more important, to protect children or to protect the uniqueness, some would say sanctity, of religious institutions and their leaders as places where persons with whom deep and sometimes troubling thoughts, feelings, and confessions can be shared? Thirdly, how do you personally handle reporting in your ministry setting? Have you personally known of a case where non-reporting led to prolonged abuse? Panelists, let's hear your comments. I'll start with Rabbi Don Levin.
So I think that what makes for a successful relationship between a clergy person and members of their community is trust. And trust is a sacred good. part of the way that you build trust is through clarity and through the knowledge of what is expected and what can be contained in confidence. And I am very, very clear with members of my congregation of what is able to be held in confidence and what isn't able to be held in confidence. Because I think the other thing that makes for the sanctity of a house of worship or religious institution is knowing that it is safe. And the way that you know that something is safe is to know that if somebody is vulnerable or is being abused, that clergy member who may be involved in that family system or in that communal system is going to be there to protect that child without fail. In the Reform movement in Jewish tradition, recently there was an enormous amount of sweeping out the closet. That there used to be systems in place where there might be an allegation or a wonderment about whether somebody had done something to someone, and then it was handled quietly. And then that person went on to another system, either another congregation or some other organization, and of course the behaviors continued, and you just passed on the hurt to some other unsuspecting individual. This was behaviors that we determined were happening at places like summer camps or in youth group settings, or in places especially where children are supposed to feel 100% safe and secure, and where their parents and family members will know that their children are 100% safe and secure. And so we ask ourselves in your statement, do we need to choose between protecting children and protecting religious institutions? And I say the only way that you can really protect the integrity of a religious institution is by protecting children. One follows the other. It's not in contrast with the other. And I feel badly that this was something that religious organizations felt they needed to oppose in Utah, because I believe actually churches and synagogues and houses of worship are safer when people know that the clergy there are required to report incidents of child abuse when they learn of them.
Thank you. Carl.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dan. That's very well put. And in fact, I know that I took the counter about not requiring to report child abuse. And it's been an issue that I've struggled with when I was a pastor, and not because I ever encountered it, but because I was trained, much like a Roman Catholic priest was in my Lutheran tradition, that there's a sacredness to the confessional, the time of confession in which you forgive someone their sins. And I mean, for a Roman Catholic priest, I hope our listeners understand that can be even more challenging, because revealing the contents of a person's confession. Now, I understand it isn't just in counseling sharing that there's child abuse, but it's in the specific circumstances of confession of sin and absolution. In that moment, that's what's sacred. It isn't just in general counseling. But in that moment of confession, I was going to say for a priest, revealing the contents of a person's confession is a mortal sin and is grounds for excommunication for a priest. And so you see there's a profound moral dilemma, at least in the case of a Roman Catholic priest. Now, in the Lutheran tradition, we don't distinguish mortal and venial sins. There are obviously more and less sins, but the idea is that if there's a sin that is so disturbing someone that they need to have this moment of forgiveness from God for what they've done so that they can be freed to be a better human being, that this is a moment that this should happen. The thing is though, I ain't gonna lie, that I've really shifted my position, and I'm really honestly probably more, no, I know I am, I'm more where you're at, Dan, on this issue. I've gone back and forth, but as seeing the nature of child abuse and how it's hidden and how institutions have hidden it, and this just provides another place where it's hidden in an institution that needs the trust of the public and its parishioners and especially its children. And so I just wanted to argue the other side of the case so that some people had an understanding of the tension that's there. So thanks.
Thank you very much. Tom.
Well, Carl, in the state of Texas, you better be.
No, I know. I know I have to. Yeah.
Because in the state of Texas, it is a Class A misdemeanor not to report.
Yep.
Clergy are specifically mentioned in the legislation. And you can receive a $4,000 fine and up to a year in jail for not reporting. And I think of all the crazy things the state legislature in Texas does, that is one wonderful thing that Texas has done. Yes, the good old boy system lasted too long. And not being Roman Catholic, not being from a tradition that's even very close to that sort of hierarchical system, with that sort of understanding of confession, of the confessional, I don't understand the ins and outs of that, but I do know that the priest, upon hearing the confession before granting absolution, requires some things, and the requirement in that situation, I think, must be that the person self-report and then check up and make sure that it's done before absolution should be granted. It seems to me like in even those confessional organizations like the Roman Catholic Church, they could get to that place. I've often felt like I needed to have a sign, and in fact, some of us were told that we needed to create signs and put them on the front of our desk. There are certain things that you can say to me that I must report, and I think that I've never created such a sign, but
I tell my students that too.
I want to. We've got to protect our children.
Thank you. Mel?
Yeah, sometimes it's very nice to be naive. I had no idea that so many states allowed for clergy privilege on this particular issue of the confessional. 33 states, you say, and you took their side. And California is one of them. I could get away with anything, I suppose, but then that's California, isn't it? It's the left coast, the west coast, whatever. But the reality is it's a horrible thing. And I think that in some churches, it's a theological position that binds our hands. And that means that we need to be thinking about how that theological position comes about, what is absolutely essential to that theological position, why is it, can you justify it in a public situation, in a court? It also means that sexual predators in particular, but also other people who abuse children can get away with all kinds of things. And I think they also bind our hands as clergy, because basically we want them to confess, they want to confess, but if they confess, we can't tell anybody we can't get them help. We cannot do that because it becomes public issue at that point in time. So I bind them, they bind themselves, and the church binds them. I'm thankful that in my church I can't absolve them from anything. I can hear them, I can pray with them, I can point them in certain directions, but I have to say that especially with sexual abuse, it's very, very difficult for those people to change. Very difficult, almost impossible. I wouldn't say it's not possible, because God is gracious and God can do great things. But the reality is, if you look at the statistic, it's not going to come anywhere close to that. So I think that this is a really difficult problem. I wish that states would take more control, like Texas has in this particular, but I didn't like the idea that it was only a misdemeanor. I wish it really counted. I wish it were a felony, so that even pastors would have to think twice about, what are we going to do? I wish we had a Catholic. I wish Bishop Olson were here today, because he is a Catholic bishop in the state of Texas. I'd sure like to know what he thinks.
Yeah. Maybe we can do a follow-up with that. I would say that one of the things that we need to also look at is, why is it that clergy beyond the theological position that you described, why is it that clergy are generally reluctant to report? And I think that part of that is, sometimes it is from a theological place. And that theological place in preserving the sanctity of that relationship, I understand. At the same time, I also have had conversations with people who lost their faith because they felt they were not protected because how that was held. The other thing is that I think that we as a society really need to take a good hard look at improving the systems of what happens when a report is made, so that we have confidence in the system of what happens when you call the Department of Children and Family Services or whatever it happens to be in your individual state, so that there are qualified and trained guardians ad litems who can represent the interests of the children, so that things are held in confidence while an investigation is being made, so that not only are children protected, but family systems are protected, so that you don't destroy a family system. A person doesn't lose their employment, doesn't lose certain of the things that make it impossible for there to be any kind of safety going forward or a repair to that broken family system. If we can, I think, perhaps provide more resources, better training, and a better system for what happens when people report, I think maybe we may encourage people to do more responsible reporting.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, I think one of the things that you spoke of in your opening statement, Andrea, was that this whole issue of non-clergy being protected, that the loopholes extend to non-clergy in a religious setting being protected from having to report. That just expands this abuse and this system of not dealing with it appropriately in such crazy directions. I understand we have different understandings among us of who constitutes clergy, and some religious groups don't even have much of an understanding of that there are clergy set apart from others. But still, we're just expanding the notion that people can know that children are being abused, that lots of people can know that children are being abused, and nobody is required to do anything about it, but pray with the perpetrator.
So I'm going to ask a question here, which may be a little bit late to ask this question before our break, but I'm going to ask it anyway. We've been talking about the confessional and the legal side relating to that, but much of the abuse that has happened, we know, is reported by the person who's been abused or by their families, and still there's a silence. Now that is not something related to any legal situation or the confessional. That seems to be something within religious communities sometimes that wants us to make it hush things up, rather than deal with it. How does that fit into all of this?
Well, I think because clergy are so intimately involved in family systems, I think sometimes clergy feel like I can fix it myself. Or I don't want to blow up that family by calling a state agency that's going to remove a child from a home, or that's going to send a parent to jail, or I can fix this. And the fact is that most of us as clergy don't have the first clue about how to fix these things within family systems, and we need to turn it over to people who have the training and the ability to make safe remedies.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to turn it over to people that will get it stopped.
And maybe in some ways, and that is where we start, even before the whole issue of the legislature. I mean, if there's something inbuilt into the way that some of our organizations work that wants to hush it up, this is not, we may be putting the blame onto the wrong person if we're just saying it's a legislature problem. Maybe our problem.
Communities clearly should have high levels of expectation and standards for accountability. I mean, I think this is one of the dangers even of independent churches in the Christian tradition who are just out on their own, and you have abusive leaders, and who holds them accountable. And as much as people hate structure and hierarchy, they can be also tools to hold people accountable.
Thank you. Let's have a break.
We hope you're enjoying today's program. If you'd like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the vision and history of the program, and we invite you to become a ministry partner, explore our Town Hall Estates healthcare facilities, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, we look forward to receiving your letters. You may write us at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. If you have a prayer request, please send it to prayerrequest@americanreligious.org. Thank you for writing and thank you for watching. Now, back to today's closing statements.
Welcome back to today's very important topic. Our panelists are now going to give some closing remarks. Tom.
Thank you. We in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ are a very independent bunch. There are very few things that are required of us as clergy besides education. And there is a process to becoming ordained. But beyond that, then there is not a hierarchy that can tell us what to do. And our congregations govern themselves. We are a very independent bunch, but not here on this issue. This was the first place that I had to take specific training and learn about all the laws that required me to report. And the reason is that there are three victims when there is no reporting. Not only the abused child, but the congregation and the faith itself.
Thank you.
In the Lutheran tradition, we argue about this at pastors' conferences, and so you have people who have a variety of different points of view on it. I mean, not variety, it's really two different positions, which were laid out today. And I would say the majority I found have no problem reporting. They would say that's part of their ministerial responsibility. And all I can say is in my situation, even when I was clergy, and I resigned from the clergy roster, but when I was at Concordia, clergy did not have any kind of privilege at all because you're primarily a professor. So we had to obey the law if anyone. And I mean, that's a dangerous thing because I get these things that students write sometimes and you're going, is this what's going on here? You know, and I always tell that warning, you don't write about certain things if you don't want me to report it. So, and then I'm going, I don't know, is that helpful though? It's because are we providing cover for people? But anyway, all right.
Okay.
Like most of us that have been either in the church or the synagogue most of our lives, if not all of our lives, we have seen all kinds of abuse take place. Not just child abuse, but and not just sexual abuse, but also spousal abuse, and so forth. So it's a really deep issue that pastors and rabbis attempt to work on. But the reality is, I had one case in which I became involved, and it was a person who had 4 children, and he made a statement in front of another friend that I'm going to go home and I'm going to shoot my kids and I'm going to shoot myself. And this person called me and said, what should we do? And I said, well, now that you've done that to me, I think I have to report this. You're a third party, but still, I need to report this. And I called Child Services and I said, I can't give you everything on this. You can talk to so-and-so or so-and-so, because I had 2 other people that said it. And I wish that you would take a look at it. I want you to be gentle with this person because this person is in a lot of physical pain and may not understand. They sent out a SWAT team, pulled him out of his car in front of his kids, stood him up against the wall, and then they arrested him, only to find out that there was nothing to it. So it's a very heavy issue that has weighed on me ever since, and I will probably have a very difficult time ever doing it again. But I still think it needs to be done.
And I hear what you're saying, Mel, which is why I think that there needs to be a good hard look at systems of what happens when there is reporting. Yep. But the thing that I would say is to my fellow clergy, even if your state allows the exemption, please don't exempt yourself. I have seen that the hurt that is imposed when a person is abused and doesn't feel protected, when they find out that their clergy member knew and didn't do anything, the hurt is so long-lasting, and it's not just in that person, it's in the entire family system. It can destroy the entirety of their connection to their faith tradition. It's precisely in the moment when they need their faith tradition the most, when they're trying to recover from an abusive situation. And so hopefully we can create systems where reporting is a healing moment and safely secures the children of difficult family situations.
Thank you very much. A very, very important conversation. My background is as an educator of all ages. And particularly when I was in an environment with younger children, the impact you saw on some of them from abusive situations that had not been dealt with was phenomenal. And that, to me, I have to go back to the Gospels where Jesus says very clearly, if you abuse that child, right, a millstone, you better have a millstone around your neck. That's it, as far as I'm concerned. There is no excuse. There is no excuse. And I think that sometimes as faith communities, we want to be forgiving, we want to manage things ourselves, we want to do things, and there's some things we just cannot manage ourselves, and do not have a right to, I would say, because harm is happening to others, and that responsibility of no harm, I think, should be something that is out there with all clergy, and something we are proponents of, and no matter what our traditions are. The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. So now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.